Something changed inside Kensington Palace, and according to palace insiders who have spent decades watching power move silently through the private corridors of the House of Windsor, the moment it happened was so cold, so precise, and so deeply unsettling that even senior aides who believed they had seen every royal crisis imaginable reportedly stopped speaking altogether. Because what began as an ordinary internal strategy meeting suddenly transformed into something far more dangerous. Something that many now believe may mark the true beginning of Prince William's reign long before any crown ever touches Prince William's head. Witnesses now claim that the future king entered that private operations briefing carrying none of the warmth the public normally associates with Prince William, none of the easy confidence seen beside Catherine, Princess of Wales during public engagements, and none of the carefully balanced composure that has defined Prince William throughout years of royal duty, because according to those familiar with palace operations, Prince William walked into that room carrying something much heavier than protocol, much heavier than succession pressure, and much heavier than the burden of public expectation. Prince William walked in carrying suspicion. And according to sources close to Kensington Palace, that suspicion had been building for weeks, not days, not isolated frustrations.
Weeks.
Weeks of confidential schedules somehow appearing in media speculation before official announcements were finalized. Weeks of sensitive planning conversations somehow circulating beyond trusted royal channels. Weeks of carefully protected operational discussions connected to the future monarchy somehow finding their way into places they should never have reached. And with every unexplained leak, every misplaced briefing, and every whispered conversation that somehow escaped palace walls, insiders claim Prince William became harder to read, quieter in private, colder in meetings, and increasingly convinced that someone inside the institution Prince William is preparing to inherit had already crossed a line that could never be ignored.
Now, ask yourself something.
If you are the future king, if the crown your children are one day expected to inherit was slowly losing control from within, if private family matters connected to Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were no longer fully protected, how long would you stay silent? Because according to royal observers, this was never simply about leaks. This was about trust. And inside the monarchy, once trust begins to fracture, everything else begins to follow. By the time that private meeting began, reports suggest the atmosphere inside Kensington Palace had already become noticeably colder, with competing advisory circles quietly forming around different senior figures, overlapping chains of influence reportedly creating confusion behind ceremonial schedules, and long-serving staff members allegedly beginning to notice subtle but unmistakable shifts in how information moved through the palace, how decisions were communicated, and perhaps most importantly, who was suddenly being excluded from conversations they once controlled. And that is where Catherine, Princess of Wales, reportedly began noticing something that others missed. According to sources familiar with Kensington Palace operations, Catherine, Princess of Wales, had quietly observed Prince William becoming increasingly withdrawn after certain internal meetings, increasingly guarded after conversations involving succession planning, and increasingly protective whenever discussions turned toward family security, institutional restructuring, or the growing health concerns surrounding King Charles III, whose physical exhaustion has reportedly added enormous emotional pressure to an institution already facing one of its most uncertain transitions in decades. But insiders now whisper that the real emotional shift did not begin with King Charles. The real shift began with Princess Anne. Because according to palace figures who understand how influence really moves behind royal walls, Prince William had reportedly begun consulting Princess Anne more frequently than ever before, studying Princess Anne's famously uncompromising philosophy of duty, discipline, sacrifice, and absolute loyalty to the crown. And those close to palace operations now believe that somewhere between those private conversations and those increasingly fragile internal meetings, Prince William stopped thinking like a prince preparing for future responsibility, and started thinking like a monarch preparing for war. And if insiders are right, what happened during that closed-door meeting was not Prince William losing control. It was Prince William finally deciding to take it. But what Prince William allegedly discovered in the documents placed in front of Prince William that evening may have changed everything. What happened next, according to those familiar with the private machinery of Kensington Palace, was the moment several long-serving palace veterans allegedly realized that the institution they had spent decades quietly navigating through ceremony, diplomacy, and carefully protected influence was no longer being shaped by the old rules. Because as Prince William reportedly sat at the head of that closed-door strategy meeting surrounded by senior aides, communications advisors, and members of Prince William's expanding operational circle, sources now claim a set of confidential briefing documents was quietly placed in front of the future king, and within moments of reviewing what those documents allegedly contained, the emotional temperature inside the room changed so dramatically that even individuals who had worked through royal crises, succession rumors, family scandals, and decades of internal politics reportedly stopped taking notes altogether. According to palace insiders now whispering through royal media circles, those documents did not simply contain routine scheduling inconsistencies, minor communication errors, or harmless administrative confusion, but rather a pattern so precise, so deeply unsettling, and so impossible to dismiss that Prince William allegedly began seeing what many inside the institution had been too afraid to say aloud. Because according to those same sources, highly sensitive discussions connected to future succession planning, private family movements, security preparations, and even confidential strategy sessions involving the long-term protection of the monarchy were somehow surfacing outside trusted channels with alarming speed, sometimes within hours of private meetings, sometimes before briefing notes had even been finalized, and sometimes in language so specific that Prince William reportedly became convinced someone inside the institution was no longer merely careless. Someone Prince William allegedly believed was talking. Now think about that for a moment. Not tabloids guessing. Not commentators speculating. Not harmless palace gossip moving through aristocratic dinner parties. But private operational information connected to the future of the British monarchy allegedly finding its way beyond protected walls while King Charles III continued facing growing physical exhaustion, while public scrutiny surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle continued dominating headlines. And while the institution itself was already fighting to project stability during one of the most emotionally vulnerable periods in modern royal history. If you were Prince William, would you call it coincidence? Or would you call it betrayal? Because according to insiders allegedly present in that room, Prince William did not react immediately, did not raise Prince William's voice, did not slam documents against the table, and did not allow emotion to take control the way many expected a frustrated heir might. But instead, Prince William reportedly did something far more unsettling, because sources claim Prince William slowly closed the final briefing folder, placed both hands on the polished conference table, looked directly across the room towards senior palace figures who had served under multiple generations of the monarchy, and remained completely silent for several long seconds, and, according to witnesses, that silence felt heavier than any confrontation that followed. Then came the question that insiders now say changed everything. Who knew? Not who sent it. Not who leaked it. Not who benefited. Who knew? And according to palace observers familiar with how power operates behind royal walls, that question reportedly terrified the room, because everyone present immediately understood that Prince William was no longer searching for mistakes. Prince William was searching for loyalties. Sources now suggest that as the silence inside that meeting became almost unbearable, Catherine, Princess of Wales, who had reportedly been present during portions of the strategic discussion, quietly studied the reactions unfolding around the table, and insiders claim Catherine had already sensed something was deeply wrong long before that evening. Because over recent weeks, Catherine had allegedly noticed private schedules moving too quickly, operational conversations reaching people who should never have had access, and certain long-serving aides suddenly behaving with a level of caution, hesitation, and emotional distance that Catherine, Princess of Wales, reportedly found impossible to ignore. But according to sources close to Kensington Palace, even Catherine appeared unsettled by what happened next. Because once Prince William finished reviewing the documents, once the room understood the seriousness of what had allegedly been discovered, and once every face in that meeting had been carefully studied, insiders now claim Prince William slowly stood up, stepped away from the table, walked toward the tall windows overlooking the palace grounds, and remained facing the glass long enough for several senior staff members to reportedly avoid eye contact altogether. And when Prince William finally turned back toward the room, those present now claim the future king looked different. Not emotional, not angry, not wounded, resolved. And according to multiple palace sources, the words Prince William allegedly delivered next sent a chill through every person in that room, because Prince William reportedly looked directly at senior household figures and said that the crown has survived wars, abdications, scandals, betrayals, and generations of weakness, but the crown will not survive divided loyalty inside its own walls. And just like that, nobody spoke. Not a single aide, not a communications director, not a security official, not even the most senior palace veterans who had spent decades believing they understood how royal power truly worked. Because in that moment, insiders claim everyone in the room understood one terrifying truth. Prince William was no longer investigating a leak. Prince William was identifying enemies. And according to palace whispers now spreading through both Kensington and Buckingham Palace, what Prince William did immediately after that meeting would leave several powerful figures inside the monarchy wondering whether the future king had just launched something far more dangerous than an internal review, whether Prince William had just begun a silent purge. By the following morning, according to individuals familiar with the inner rhythms of Kensington Palace, the emotional shock of Prince William's warning had not faded, had not softened, and had not been dismissed as the temporary frustration of an heir carrying too much pressure, because as palace staff quietly arrived for what many believed would be another carefully structured day of meetings, schedules, ceremonial preparations, and controlled public messaging, insiders now claim something had changed almost overnight. Something subtle at first, almost invisible to those outside the institution, but unmistakable to anyone who had spent years surviving inside royal corridors where power rarely announces itself openly and almost always moves in silence. At first, it looked routine. A revised meeting list, a changed security clearance, a communications briefing moved without explanation, a familiar name missing from a sensitive planning session, a long-serving aide suddenly redirected towards ceremonial duties far removed from confidential operations. None of it dramatic, none of it public. And yet, according to palace insiders, every person inside Kensington understood exactly what it meant. Prince William had started moving. Reports now suggest that within hours of that explosive closed-door confrontation, internal access privileges connected to strategic communications, private scheduling, family movement coordination, and succession planning were quietly reviewed under Prince William's direct authority. And according to individuals familiar with those operational changes, several long-established informal communication channels that had reportedly existed for years inside the royal household were suddenly frozen, restricted, or placed under tighter oversight connected directly to Prince William's inner circle, a development that many senior staff allegedly described as unprecedented for an heir who had not yet officially taken the throne.
Now, ask yourself something.
Would that sound like anger? Would that sound like emotion? Or does that sound like preparation? Because according to royal observers who have spent years studying institutional transitions inside the House of Windsor, what happened next carried all the signs of something far larger than damage control, because rather than publicly addressing rumors, rather than allowing palace communications teams to quietly contain speculation, and rather than offering reassurance to nervous household staff, Prince William reportedly did the exact opposite. Prince William said nothing. No explanation. No clarification. No softening. And insiders now claim that silence created more fear than any speech ever could. Because once access began changing, once meetings began shifting, and once trusted faces started quietly disappearing from sensitive conversations, long-serving aides reportedly began realizing that the future king was no longer testing loyalty. The future king was measuring it. According to palace figures now speaking cautiously through royal media circles, one of the first people to recognize the full scale of what was happening was Catherine, Princess of Wales, who insiders claim had already spent weeks quietly observing the emotional pressure building inside Prince William, particularly as concerns surrounding King Charles III's health continued creating uncertainty around succession timelines, institutional stability, and the emotional future awaiting Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. And sources now suggest Catherine understood that what looked like an operational crackdown on the surface was becoming something far more personal beneath it. Because according to those close to Kensington Palace, Prince William was no longer thinking only about the crown. Prince William was thinking about inheritance. Not titles, not ceremonies, not headlines. Inheritance. The kind of inheritance children live inside. The kind of inheritance families pay for. The kind of inheritance institutions either protect or lose forever. And insiders claim that realization transformed Prince William in ways even longtime staff members found difficult to ignore, because individuals who once described Prince William as approachable, measured, and quietly diplomatic now reportedly began using very different words. Focused,
Disciplined. Cold.
uncompromising, and perhaps most revealing of all,
Prepared.
But according to Palace Whispers, Prince William was not building this new structure alone. Because while internal reviews continued quietly reshaping operations behind the scenes, reports suggest Prince William had already begun holding increasingly frequent private consultations with Princess Anne, whose reputation for relentless duty, emotional discipline, and absolute intolerance for divided loyalty has made Princess Anne one of the most respected and perhaps most feared figures inside the modern monarchy. Sources close to palace operations now claim that during one particularly private consultation at Windsor Castle, Princess Anne allegedly told Prince William something that may have permanently shaped the future king's approach to leadership. Do not protect comfort. Protect the institution. Now, whether those exact words were spoken remains impossible to independently verify, but according to royal commentators who understand how Princess Anne's influence has shaped multiple generations of the royal family, the philosophy itself sounds unmistakably authentic, and insiders now believe Prince William embraced that philosophy completely. And once Prince William did, the atmosphere inside Kensington reportedly became even colder. Because according to sources close to palace staffing operations, several advisors who had once relied on personal relationships, informal influence, and long-established internal alliances suddenly found themselves excluded from confidential briefings, removed from strategic communications, and quietly pushed further away from the conversations that would shape the next generation of the monarchy. No public scandal. No headlines. No official announcements. Just silence. And in institutions built on proximity to power, silence can be the loudest message of all. But according to palace insiders, the most unsettling part was still to come, because just as staff began realizing Prince William was consolidating control, a private evening meeting at Windsor reportedly revealed something even more dangerous. Prince William was not simply removing weaknesses. Prince William was building an alliance. And the next name connected to that alliance would send an even deeper chill through palace corridors. Prince Edward. By the time the name of Prince Edward began quietly circulating through the inner corridors of Kensington Palace, according to sources familiar with palace operations, what had initially looked like an emotionally charged response from Prince William to a series of internal leaks was beginning to look far more calculated, far more organized, and far more dangerous than many senior staff had originally assumed. Because while some aides initially believed Prince William's sudden operational reviews, tightened communication controls, and silent personnel shifts were temporary reactions driven by frustration, palace veterans now whisper that the moment Prince Edward quietly entered the picture, the entire emotional balance inside the House of Windsor changed, and with it came the growing realization that the future king was no longer simply defending the institution. The future king was redesigning it. According to palace insiders now speaking cautiously through royal media circles, Prince Edward's involvement reportedly began through a series of private consultations tied to communications oversight, operational confidentiality, staffing integrity, and long-term structural planning connected to the next generation of royal leadership. And for those who understand Prince Edward's reputation inside the monarchy, that development immediately raised eyebrows, because unlike more publicly visible Royal figures whose influence often unfolds through speeches, appearances, or charitable platforms, Prince Edward has long been viewed by senior palace figures as one of the most disciplined, discreet, and institutionally loyal members of the entire royal family, someone who rarely speaks unnecessarily, rarely moves publicly, and almost never becomes involved unless the stability of the crown itself is believed to be at stake. Now, ask yourself something. If Prince William was already working closely with Princess, and if Catherine, Princess of Wales, was quietly stabilizing Prince William emotionally behind closed doors, and if Prince Edward suddenly began appearing in private operational reviews connected to the future monarchy, does that sound like crisis management? Or does that sound like succession already moving in real time? Because according to those close to palace operations, that is exactly when whispers about something insiders allegedly began calling the Heirs Accord started quietly spreading through both Kensington and Buckingham Palace, a phrase that has never appeared in official royal documentation, never been acknowledged publicly by palace communications teams, and never been formally confirmed by any senior royal source. Yet, according to multiple royal commentators familiar with institutional power structures, the phrase reportedly referred to an emerging alliance centered around Prince William's vision for a monarchy built not on informal influence, inherited comfort, or quiet favoritism, but on discipline, confidentiality, operational clarity, and absolute institutional loyalty. And according to palace insiders, the emotional consequences of that shift became visible almost immediately. Sources now suggest that within days of Prince Edward's alleged involvement, several long-serving household figures reportedly lost access to highly sensitive scheduling systems, strategic communications groups, and private succession planning channels that had once defined their relevance inside the institution. And while no public announcements explained the changes, no official briefings acknowledged them, and no media statements clarified what was happening behind closed doors, those inside royal operations allegedly understood exactly what the silence meant. Prince William was not reviewing the institution anymore. Prince William was consolidating it. But according to individuals familiar with the emotional climate inside Kensington Palace, the real turning point did not come from spreadsheets, access codes, or staffing reviews. The real turning point came during a late evening strategy session at Windsor Castle, a meeting reportedly attended by Prince William, Princess, and Prince Edward, selected security advisors, and members of Prince William's most trusted operational circle, and according to palace whispers now spreading through aristocratic and administrative networks alike. It was during that meeting that Prince William was allegedly shown information so specific, so deeply unsettling, and so personally sensitive that several individuals present reportedly described Prince William's reaction as colder than anything they had ever witnessed from the future king. Sources now claim that among the confidential material allegedly reviewed that evening were patterns connected not simply to operational leaks, but to discussions involving private family protection, communications surrounding Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, and even confidential movement protocols connected to Catherine, Princess of Wales, a discovery that insiders suggest may have transformed Prince William's concerns from institutional frustration into something far more personal. And if that is true, then everything changed. Because according to witnesses allegedly briefed on the aftermath of that meeting, Prince William reportedly remained completely silent for several long moments, carefully reviewing each document while the room itself grew increasingly tense. And according to those same accounts, even Princess, and a woman whose emotional discipline has become almost legendary within royal circles, reportedly understood immediately that whatever Prince William had just seen would permanently alter the direction of the future monarchy. Then came the moment palace veterans now say they will never forget. According to insiders, Prince William slowly closed the final file, looked directly at every senior figure in that room, and delivered a warning so cold, so precise, and so deeply institutional that several staff members allegedly described it as the moment the reign of King Charles emotionally ended inside palace walls. Reports suggest Prince William said that loyalty to personalities, friendships, traditions, and private alliances may have built comfort inside the monarchy. But from this moment forward, only loyalty to the crown would survive. And according to sources familiar with the aftermath, Nobody challenged Prince William. Nobody questioned Prince William. Nobody even looked away. Because in that moment, everyone in that room allegedly understood something that would soon send fear through every corridor of the House of Windsor. Prince William was no longer preparing to inherit power. Prince William had already started using it. But what happened during Prince William's final closed-door meeting with senior household figures just 48 hours later would reportedly send an even deeper chill through the palace, because this time, Prince William was no longer asking questions. Prince William was drawing a permanent line. By the time senior household figures quietly entered that final closed-door meeting inside Windsor Castle, according to palace insiders who claimed to understand just how dramatically the emotional balance inside the House of Windsor had shifted over recent weeks, nobody in that room believed they were attending another routine operational review, another confidential strategy session, or another carefully managed discussion about scheduling, communications, and ceremonial appearances, because after the silent restructurings, the sudden access restrictions, the unexplained staff reassignments, the growing influence of Princess Anne, the discreet involvement of Prince Edward, and the unmistakable transformation in Prince William's leadership style, every person who walked through those private doors allegedly understood one chilling reality. This time, Prince William was not gathering information. Prince William was delivering judgment. According to individuals familiar with palace operations, the room itself reportedly felt different from previous meetings, because gone were the tentative conversations, the carefully diplomatic introductions, the polite ceremonial language, and the quiet assumptions that every royal disagreement could eventually be softened through protocol, tradition, or private reassurance. And in their place stood something far colder, something far more disciplined, and, according to multiple palace sources, something that many senior aides would later describe as the first true glimpse of what the monarchy may look like under Prince William long before any formal coronation ever takes place. Sources now claim that Catherine, Princess of Wales, was not seated directly inside the operational core of that final meeting, yet several insiders suggest Catherine remained close enough to understand the emotional weight of what was unfolding, because according to those familiar with Kensington Palace operations, Catherine had spent weeks quietly helping Prince William carry the enormous pressure created by King Charles III's health concerns, escalating succession discussions, institutional distrust, and the growing fear that the monarchy Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis may one day inherit was becoming increasingly vulnerable from within. And, according to palace whispers, that concern had become deeply personal. Because for Prince William, this was no longer simply about headlines. This was no longer simply about operational leaks. This was no longer simply about palace politics. This was about family. This was about inheritance. This was about whether the institution built over centuries could survive another generation if loyalty inside its own walls continued to fracture under the weight of private influence, competing factions, and emotional hesitation. And according to those allegedly briefed on the final meeting, the moment Prince William entered the room, every conversation immediately stopped. No whispers, no introductions, no formalities, just silence. Long, deliberate, almost unbearable silence. And according to witnesses, Prince William did not sit immediately, did not open briefing folders, and did not begin with explanations, because instead Prince William reportedly stood at the head of the conference table, looked slowly across the faces of senior household figures who had served multiple generations of the monarchy, and allowed the silence itself to become part of the message. Now, ask yourself this. What would feel more unsettling? A prince shouting in anger? Or a future king who no longer needs to? Because according to palace insiders, when Prince William finally began speaking, Prince William's tone was not emotional, not defensive, and not reactive, but controlled, measured, and so emotionally cold that several long-serving palace veterans allegedly struggled to meet Prince William's eyes. Sources now claim Prince William reminded everyone in that room that the British monarchy had survived abdications, wars, scandals, betrayals, political upheaval, public outrage, and generations of private conflict, not because the institution was comfortable, not because the institution was popular, and not because the institution avoided pain, but because when survival demanded discipline, the crown always chose discipline over comfort. And then came the line that insiders now say sent an unmistakable chill through every person in that room. According to multiple palace sources, Prince William allegedly looked directly at senior aides and quietly said, "The crown remembers everything." And according to those present, nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Nobody challenged a single word, because everyone inside that room allegedly understood exactly what Prince William meant. Old alliances, private loyalties, protected networks, informal influence, quiet favoritism, every system that once protected power through proximity rather than principle was over. Sources now suggest that in the days following that final meeting, additional operational reviews quietly expanded across both Kensington and Buckingham Palace. Sensitive communication channels reportedly moved under tighter control. Trusted circles became smaller, accountability became sharper, and long-serving figures who once believed their influence would last indefinitely allegedly began realizing that under Prince William's emerging leadership, access would no longer be inherited. Access would be earned. And perhaps that is why royal commentators now believe the most important transformation inside the modern monarchy may already be underway, not through ceremony, not through headlines, and not through coronation, but through quiet decisions made behind locked palace doors by a future king who may have finally decided that protecting Catherine, Princess of Wales, protecting Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, protecting the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II, and protecting the future of the House of Windsor all require something the old monarchy often struggled to embrace: absolute discipline. So now the question moves to you. Do you believe Prince William is becoming exactly the kind of king the monarchy needs? Or do you believe the House of Windsor may be entering its coldest era yet? Share your thoughts below, because your perspective shapes this conversation, and if you follow royal drama, succession battles, palace insiders, the future of King Charles III's monarchy, and the rising influence of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and join this community, because what happens next inside the royal family may change the monarchy forever.